Good, good day to everybody. Welcome to this Africa webinar series in which we're looking at transporting temperature sensitive products in Africa. This is being hosted by Optimize Claims together with Africa Ahead, the Sustainability Challenge. To take a look at this topic today, we have a number of experts. We have Johan van der Westhuizen, fresh produce trainer Course Bubble from South Africa. We have Roderick Coutinho, banana exporter from Ghana. We have Ope, who's CEO of Kenio Logistics from Nigeria. We have Bruno, marine insurance leader at Swan Mauritius. And we have Ibrahim, fresh projects logistics sea frigo in Egypt. And of course, we have our host for today, Kingsley Kulwa, CEO Optimus from Cameroon. Without further ado, Kingsley, over to you.
Thank you, Liz, for the intro. Also, I want to give a special thanks to all of our partners who have supported our endeavors to develop and bring to you this Africa webinar series. So there's Sesam, there's the Africa Logistics Magazine, there's the Insurance Training College of Uganda, there's OSI in Kenya, and the Africa Insurance Organization. The African Continental Free Trade Area recently became a reality, and if you're like me, then you're thoroughly excited about the promise that it holds. The Africa Import-Export Bank, together with the African Union and the Africa Secretariat, have put together an intra-Africa trade fair. The first of this trade fair took place in Ghana, and the next one is to take place in Durban, South Africa. In a few days' time, I think 4 days from today, the Africa Insurers Organization will be hosting its 47th General Assembly in Lagos, Nigeria, to talk about how to rebuild Africa's economy from an insurance perspective. So I'm excited about our topic of today because it is directly relevant to all these events and for those that conduct business with and within Africa. Moving goods across the continent is hard, mainly because of its size and its disjointedness and poor infrastructure. But moving temperature-sensitive product in Africa is particularly challenging. So we have put together a panel of experts from across the continent to share with you experiences on the ground and to recommend solutions to overcome these challenges. Liz, over to you.
Thank you so much, Kingsley. That was a really interesting presentation to start off our discussion. What I'd like to do now is to turn to Johan and ask the question, having worked with the PPECB and held several positions of responsibility in the Southern African fruit industry, how important is it for a fruit exporter to maintain the cold chain? Which markets, in your experience, are strictest when it comes to cold chain maintenance? Johan?
Good day. Thank you for the question. Yes, just a quick background. The PPECB in South Africa enables South Africa to actually export fruit via bilateral agreements with different countries. They've been involved with the cold chain part of exports since 1926, which means they've got a lot of experience. We must all remember when it comes to standards and markets, that we're actually exporting a perishable product, which means they expire from the time they're picked till the time they actually arrive at destination. And that basically means that the only way to maintain quality is the cold chain. And there is so many parts of the cold chain where problems arise. At farm, we've experienced that a lot of fruit don't go into the cold chain quickly enough, and then you've got your shipping as well as your basically at arrival. Most of the commodities that we ship to South Africa are both climateric, which is important, and non-climateric. Why this is important is that basically your climateric fruit will ripen after they've been picked, and that is very important because they release heat, and that must be managed. The factor where South Africa and PPECB actually controls it very well is that they got complete control from the time it's actually loaded into a container and up to the point of discharge, which means they've got stats and data on the whole route. Still, a lot of problems do arise. There's a lot of breaks. If there's a lot of studies that's been done, breaks in cold chain, that influences the final quality of the product. Certain markets obviously are more sensitive. it's very difficult to distinguish between different markets because the cold chain is important for all of them. But in South Africa, we've got special markets, what we call special markets or the distillery markets, where additional protocols are put in place for land-based distillery or en route distillery requirements for certain countries. It must be emphasized that distillery is basically just to limit your phytosanitary organisms like fruit fly or FCM on citrus. All these protocols have been aligned with between the different countries, which makes it very easy for the control of the product. It must be remembered that your pack at will never be the same as the destination if you do not maintain the cold chain from start to finish. And that is where a lot of claims arise, even though the quality at source was correct. But if there's any break in the system, then the final product and the client will not be happy. So anything else?
So thank you very much indeed for that, Johan. That's given us a very good overview of some of the challenges. I wonder if we could turn now to Roderick. And taking a trip upward into Africa, you're involved with the export of bananas from Ghana to Southern Africa and Europe. What are the biggest challenges you find when it comes to maintaining the cold chain from your farm all the way to your buyer's premises? Roderick, over to you.
Going back to Ghana, in terms of the cold chain management and the biggest or some of the challenges that we face is, or I face as a producer, as a grower, as a supplier out of Ghana. To begin with, once you've done all the work that you do on the farm, you've done all the technical work, you've produced the product with the right quality, the right specs that are needed for the market, and you've really done all your technical work to make sure that it has the right shelf life to reach to the shelf. This is now a farm to fork scenario. The next thing is now your post-harvest and your loading, which is your product coming from the farm first to the port, then vis-a-vis from the port, loaded on on a ship to the market. Inland transportation and inland logistics is the first hurdle that we face as growers and as producers, especially of fresh produce out of Ghana, dealing with bananas, which is a very sensitive and delicate product. The first thing is the road infrastructure itself does not have the right conditions in terms of transportation of banana cargo. Why? Because they are all asphalt roads, but very poorly maintained, which means they are full of potholes and they have a lot of ditches, and it's not an easy drive for any truck which is turning plus 20 tons of cargo. So moving from the farm to the port, the first hurdle that you have once you're off the farm is the quality of the road. So your truck is always shaking, and that actually causes the product or puts the product at a risk of bruising. The next thing is, once you get onto the main highway, is the congestion because of the road infrastructure. There's so much traffic that the road infrastructure cannot sustain the volume of traffic that is there. In bad days, it can take you 6 hours to reach to the port for a distance less than 120 kilometers from farm to the port. In a good day, it's a good 2.5 hours because the roads are not so efficient and the quality of the roads are not good. The volume of traffic is very high, so the road infrastructure per se has not been developed to sustain that kind of volume. Now, with a big truck, it makes it even more difficult to be able to maneuver fast enough for the driver to reach the port in the shortest possible time. We've had even situations where cargo from the farm to the port, it takes maybe even 7 hours, even if you are using a trailer genset. But that still puts the driver and the cargo at risk of any form of damage because of the delays. Now, once you're in the port or the seaways, there's no problem with the ports and the seaways because they are doing, I think, a very professional business operation. They manage the cargo very well, they maintain it very well, they give the right reporting. The only challenge sometimes is you have with some of the ports which don't give you sort of quick or a real-time information in terms of how your cargo is performing. But ports like Fruit Export Terminal and also MPS, they are very efficient and you get the right support that you need. The challenge that comes now is the shipping lines, which is the second biggest hurdle that we have, or to me, I would say is the biggest, is that the inconsistencies in terms of ships calling the port from time of arrival to sailing is where the challenge comes. Why am I saying this? Is that when you're booking your cargo, you're booking pre-vessel arrival, which means if you know your vessel is coming, say on a Thursday, calling on a Thursday out on probably in the next 24 hours, which is on a Friday morning. The issue is you pack in advance to be able to meet the vessel. Depends on the volume of cargo that you have. So sometimes you start to pack on a Monday or a Tuesday if the vessel is sailing. This is an example, if it's sailing on a Thursday evening. But sometimes the vessel skips berth or does not call, is delayed to call the port of Ghana, which is Tema Port, which is what we're using. That means your cargo is rolled over. Now, if you consider if your cargo is rolled over by an extra day or two, that's also within still the confines of acceptability. But if it goes over that, the problem is you're now putting the cargo at risk. Number one is the shelf life is compromised. Number two, your plug-in costs, and any additional costs are borne by the grower and the producer. Okay. Then the third thing is the marketing itself is delayed, and your sales projection, your planning are delayed, because obviously when my client knows that the cargo will arrive after 14 or 16 days and is rolled over with the extra 7, 8, 9, 10 days, that throws away their sales planning and their distribution program, okay, which also, disrupts the supply chain per se. The second issue is the shelf life is compromised to such an extent that by the time the cargo arrives, you're not so sure whether you still have the right quality and the right shelf life. So the thing is, when shipping lines don't meet the agreed timelines in terms of their estimated time of arrival and end up delaying, we have this challenge of cargo quality being compromised. We've had cargo which has been rolled over and delayed to such an extent that from packing to market arrival, it has taken more than 40 days, 38 days. Definitely your bananas will have gone over, and that's an outright rejection or outright loss. Yes, you talk of claims, you talk of the due process. The grower is not going to get their money in time to compensate for the losses, vis-a-vis the impact that it has in terms of the sales program for our clients. And these are some of the biggest challenges that we face as producers, as growers in Ghana, in terms of the supply chain and the cold chain management. So shipping and inland transportation, inland in terms of road infrastructure and delays and the challenges that the trucks face to be able to deliver cargo to the port. And then shipping in terms of inconsistencies where ships are either delayed from the ports that they'll be calling in before they arrive, and vis-a-vis sometimes the vessels are pushed to skip berth. And if I'm carrying 10 containers, 15, 20, 30 containers in the port, consolidated cargo in terms of fresh produce, that really disrupts everybody, and that's a loss to all the guys, not let alone the costs that come together with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Roderick. That was a really very useful overview from your perspective. I wonder now if we could turn to Ibrahim. Ibrahim, often guys like Roderick and Johan would look to you to help them to move products to their clients. From a freight forwarder's or carrier's perspective, are you seeing any recurring activities on the side of the exporters, which is making it challenging for the cold chain to be maintained? What's your take on that?
Yeah, thank you very much, Liz, and everybody. Thank you for that question. Yes, definitely from freight forwarding and logistics side and carrier side, we see a lot of challenges and incidents that is happen, and it requires a lot of attention from everybody, from the shipper, from the carrier, from all the involved party. And from our side, what we care about is developing an unbroken and uninterrupted cold chain all the way from origin to destination, which involves dealing with a lot of parties, and this process is long, that include a lot of steps. So starting from the pack house, the inland tracking, then the origin terminal, make sure that the cargo is good over the vessel, temperature is maintained, destination, and delivering cargo to the consignees. sometimes the logistics also get complicated if we are doing some multimodal. For example, if we are shipping from Egypt to spring onion to Germany, the normal shipping would take the transit time, for example, 13 days, but we can go through Cooper, for example, and do unstuffing for the cargo from the container, having cold atmosphere outside, and do the stuffing again in a reefer truck to deliver to Germany, which put a pressure on the cold chain here, and we make sure that everything is going right. So the cold chain is critical for the optimization of the product quality at destination. And if it breaks, the cold chain occur. If the breaks in the cold chain occur, the integrity will be compromised, and the product will be will have a decay or aging. And once the temperature deviation occurred, they cannot be reversed. So normally, and what I'm saying always to the shippers, that the most essential and most fundamental thing in this chain is the pre-treatment of the reefer cargo, all the post-harvest of the commodities. So we have to make sure that they are doing the right post-harvest techniques that is required for each cargo. The cargo has to be picked maybe at night or the early mornings. It has to be cooled immediately and release the field temperature. And all that happens before even we load inside the container. So it starts before the reefer containers arrive and we load it. So the condition of the product before they are stored has an important role in their condition of arrival. So that's why it's very essential that the product is being treated correctly prior to stuffing. Even though the temperature control and atmosphere management are optimal during the entire voyage, the product will only arrive in a perfect condition if the pre-treatment performed correctly. As the basics here is that we the basic requirement for the carriage of temperature control cargo is that we deliver the goods as far as possible in the same condition as it were received. So we have to receive the cargo in a good condition, in a perfect condition, and we have to work on in our cold chain after that. Before receiving the container, a PTI or pre-trip inspection is done by the carrier before releasing the reefer container. But when it arrives, an inspection from the shipper has to be done also to make sure that the container is sound, in sound condition, clean, is dry. Make sure that temperature, humidity, ventilation are adjusted as required for the cargo. So I have an incident for 2 grapes containers arrived to Rotterdam frozen, while it should be on a fresh condition. This could be the mistake from the carrier, could be, but when a container arrives to pack house, we have to make sure in the pack house that the temperature is adjusted at the right setting point. So if I requested it to be 0 for the grapes and I received the container at -5 or -10, I have to report it immediately. I have to make sure that the container is working correctly before loading it. I have to make sure that the container is dry. I will not open the container when it's working, and the right temperature, ventilation, humidity is adjusted. One important thing also that is that cause some problems and damage to the cargo is something called the hot stuffing. So usually the carriers advise that the reefer container is designed to maintain the temperature of the cargo, not to reduce it. So if I request a container for oranges that has to be loaded on a temperature of 5, so I have to receive the cargo at 5 and not receive it at hot from the field or something, or after the process without any cooling. So I have to receive it from the cold storage inside the pack house at 5 then we load it in a container at temperature 5 to be arrived to destination at 5, and it will arrive in a perfect condition. But sometimes some shippers may be trying to reduce cost, or maybe they don't have enough capacity in the cold storage. So after they process the oranges, do the pellets and everything, they leave it outside the pack house in a hot weather. And when they receive the container, they put it in the container in a temperature of 5, and the container has to work on reduce the temperature that could be 20 or 30 to go to 5, which is very bad. That could affect the quality of the product, and also it will deny them from being entitled for any problem or claims that could rise. Because once the investigation done, and Kingsley can help us with this point, once an investigation is done, after cargo arrived, if there is a problem, we can know easily if the host stuffing done, the cargo was not at optimum temperature, was loaded like that, which caused some damage to the cargo. And carrier at the time will deny any responsibility. Second thing is, and what I would like shippers to know is some basic understanding about how the reefer container is working. So the cool air is through two fans in the reefer container is pushed down and goes through the floor, which is designed to have the airflow of the cool air within the cargo and also over it. So the this T floor has to be covered in order that the cool temperature and cool airflow goes from front to the back of the container, and then it goes up before the door. Then it's returned again. So in this return, we have to make sure that we are not loading over the red line in the container. Any loading till the roof of the container will only deny the cool air from returning back, and which means that the cool air is not reaching to the whole product, which put us also that to look into the cargo storage and also the packaging. It's very important that we have the right package for the right product. I have a problem last season that containers arrived sweet potatoes with a decay. When we investigated them, temperature was good, ventilation was good, and everything was good. And the shipper was really a pioneer, understand his product. And once he done his investigation, he found that the cartons were not good. There was no air circulation going through his product, and he changed the design of the cartons to make sure that the airflow is good and there is no decay that's happening. Also, at another incident, I have a living shipments to Australia, and Australia normally requests cold treatment, which means that we load the container at a low temperature, but also it shouldn't hurt the product. But the cargo arrived with a chilling injury, and once we done the investigation, we found that the shipper loaded on a plastic box instead of cartons, which make the cargo get more of the cool air and get some chilling injuries. So these are some points of some of the problems that shippers may face, and if we control it, we will make sure that cargo will arrive in a good condition. Last important thing that I would like to highlight is that shippers has to work with experts. Either they are working with a freight forwarder, choosing the right carrier, but the trucking companies, the custom clearance, the flow of information, the flow of transportation, and everything has to go through an expert to understand what they are doing, dealing with the same cargo on a daily basis. They understand how critical is when a problem happens, how to be solved, and also giving the advice to the shipper if he is missing something, if he don't know about something, if he's working on a different cargo that he's working in. So if he's an expert with citrus, but he started a new business for sweet potatoes, he must have some advice from his logistics, either freight forwarder or carrier. So I hope that I answered your questions.
Thank you very much, Ibrahim. Yes, you did a very comprehensive answer. Thank you. That's never a bad thing. So thank you very much indeed for that. Ope, if I can turn to you now, perhaps. You run a cold chain last mile company in Nigeria, and recently there has been significant obstruction in supply chain owing to trucks stuck in traffic. How difficult is it for perishable traders in Nigeria to safely transport their goods? Electricity supply is obviously a going concern. What's available in the market to ensure fresh and frozen products don't go bad in transit?
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I'm really, really excited to be here this morning. I really count as a privilege. I'm so grateful. Thank you so much. Once again, I represent Kenyo Coaching Logistics, KCCF for short. We helped in transporting fresh fruit and vegetables from the farm gates to the final destination in Nigeria. And as you are aware, Nigeria is a very big country. But what I want to start is to say that Africa, we are unique. Africa, we need to come together and begin to form a formidable force, not just 55 countries, but a united country and with our own indigenous solutions. Why do I say that? In Nigeria, we discovered that we have very bad roads, especially right now that even the rains have started. It's getting bad. But one thing we know that we can't keep talking about the problem, we must look at solutions. What are the solutions that are available? We discovered that even the COVID-19 pandemic actually created a kind of pandemic created a kind of a positive change, especially in the way we move fruit and vegetables in Nigeria. What do I mean by that? We discovered that even the carriers by air now, for instance, from the middle belts of Nigeria to Lagos, where the consumers are, most of this produce come from the northern side. The north grow most of these fruit and vegetables and pass it down to the south, where it is being consumed. And it takes about 48 hours for the produce to arrive from that middle belt region to the south, where it is being consumed. And before you get to the final destination, about 50% of it are damaged because of temperature excursion. These are sensitive things that needs to be transported under temperature control environment. And we discovered that by the time you get to the final destination, over half of it are destroyed. But with temperature control environment, we are sure of getting about 95 to 99% still intact, wholesome. The nutrition aspect of it is still very okay. That means by the time you consume it, you are sure we are consuming things that are still wholesome and are still very good. Now, the solution to that problem was that we were able to even discuss with a carrier, which has a very big and robust aircraft. And by using that, we cut down the 48 hours to like 1 hour. So from the farm gate to the airport and from the airport to the final destination is about 4 hours, which means we have actually drastically reduced the time. And then it is a very challenging thing, but it's doable and we are doing it because we can't just continue to talk about the problem. We must also talk about the solutions that is available and what we can, that is and also applicable in a situation. In Nigeria, over 11.9 million metric tons of fruit and vegetable move across cities in Nigeria. And of this figure, it's about 500,000 that moves through the river. You can see the huge gap between what is moved and what needs to be moved. That means there's a lot of waste along that value chain. Nigeria also is one of the biggest producers of tomatoes. We're also one of the biggest losers of tomatoes because we are not transporting it under the right temperature, and that's why we are losing it. But with cold chain now, it will help to reduce waste. You know, in the north, in Europe and developed economies, you talk about waste, but here we talk about loss. The post-harvest loss is very, very high. But I know with cold chain, it can drastically reduce. Two things are key in that sector that can make. Number one is good storage facility, and number two is transporting it at the right temperature. We are getting it right in terms of storage now, but even before you get to the supermarket, it's not being transported at the right temperature. And once it's not being transported at the right temperature, we'll continue to lose day in, day and out. So with the right temperature, you get this thing there at the right, with the right temperature to arrive there at the right quality. The second aspect is power. Power is key. There's no way you talk about refrigeration without power. And we know power is a major challenge here for us. But we can't, there are also solutions, there are off-grid solutions to that. We have solar-powered cold rooms being deployed at the farm gate so that before you even transport it, the solar power cold room will have actually pre-cool it to bring it to the right temperature. Once it's at the right temperature, then you can transport at the right temperature too. So you are sure that by the time you get to the final destination, it will arrive at the right and at the right time and at the right quality. Another challenge which we face is that technical power to maintain this or skill to maintain these chillers. But it's another opportunity. We need people to come into that space and begin to service these chillers and the trucks for us. We've been able to do that by engaging more people. What do I mean by that? Training people to ensure that how to maintain our chillers at the right temperature so that we will not keep losing. By the time the chiller breaks down or the truck breaks down, you know, you're going to lose a lot. So technical aspect of it too is being taken. These are the challenges we are facing, and also we are providing the right solutions for that problem. In South Africa, for instance, they have about 14,000 or thereabouts cooling trucks. In Nigeria, we have less than 1,000 cooling trucks plying our roads. We need about 30,000 cooling trucks. But here in Nigeria, we have less than 1,000 cooling trucks, which means the gap is so wide. So, and the reason is simple. The technical, the barrier of entry into a cold chain space is high because we have to look at so many factors have to be in place for you to actually enter into that space. But be that as it may be right now, people are coming in to get to know. Cold chain in Nigeria, cold chain industry is still at the nascent stage, still at the infant stage, but I know with time it will grow and it grow and grow. Oh, that is what I have for you for now. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much indeed, Ope. And interesting comparisons there between Nigeria and South Africa to finish on. Bruno, perhaps I could turn to you now. Insurance penetration on the continent still remains at a disappointing 3%. Many on the continent have little to no access to insurance, and that it's worse when it comes to cargo insurance. So what are insurers doing, or should they be doing, to improve penetration rates? And how useful do you think insurance would be for the likes of Roderick?
Well, thank you, Liz and Kingsley for having invited me in this webinar. Well, it was very interesting, all these conversation on fresh product and logistics. Effectively, undoubtedly, the insurance penetration in Africa is very low. It has been there for a very long time, and up to now, it's very difficult to increase this. The main reason, if we go to marine cargo, is about lack of skill, mainly lack of skill. It's a worldwide phenomenon. There are very few specialists in this sector, and the traders are not very keen of insuring with African insurers. And as in marine cargo, you can insure from the source, that is from the supplier's side. Most of the imports are still being done by by the suppliers, that is China or in Europe, because they don't want to be insured. The buyers don't want to be insured by African insurers. Even though most of the countries now have done compulsory or compulsory cession for imports, they are still being done by the importers, by the suppliers. Okay, and this is even more if you look at all the African countries which are landlocked, because there's this misconception by insurers that in landlocked countries you don't need cargo insurance, which is essentially untrue. And even more, you need more cargo insurance, because the cargo insurance doesn't only insure on seas, but also inland. So there's much to be done on this. And what is a paradox in it is that the insurance cover is a international cover. It's the same practically everywhere. If you look at East Africa, which is English language, all the covers are done by English clauses, which are the same, which you see everywhere in the world. In the West, you can have more French covers, but they also use the English covers. So the problem is that with these covers, you have templates, and people use templates without knowing what's in it. And that's why this has grown up as a lack of expertise, specialists in this domain. But let's go more specifically on our topic today, that is the fresh product or temperature sensitive product. Temperature sensitive product is known as the worst risk for insurers. The main reason being that variation in temperature is something which all the precedent speakers have spoken about, all the challenges which come with it, is about the cold chain, and the main cover which insurers give for temperature control is about variation in temperature. Of course, that's the main problem. The water damage, theft damage is not, rough handling is not really a matter of concern for fresh or frozen product. It's more about variation in temperature. And if the insurers are not satisfied about the logistic involved, they won't give covers. And if we look at it, the real challenge for traders is that when you are transporting these kind of goods or exporting these kind of goods, let's say in developed countries, okay, a small variation in temperature can cause a rejection of all product, the whole consignment, meaning that you are losing much, they are losing much. Insurers in this type of goods, they rarely have partial losses. It's more about total losses. Okay, so that's why often we don't even do excesses we don't put excess in this type of cover, because most probably a loss would be a total loss of a consignment, which is big losses. Okay, so when I hear what Nigeria is going through, I understand fully that insurers won't be willing to give cover unless catastrophic covers, that is, covers like flood, like fire, like things like this, but not variation in temperature. So there is a long way to go for people for insurers to come and insure these goods. I don't see for the near future insurers going more on these type of goods, unless there is a more professional approach to the logistic, unless there may be also pooling of risk, and the more important, there is a skilled people doing the underwriting, at the insurance base. And unfortunately, that's the main challenge today. Okay, I've been embarking in a road trip, let's say, journey since about five to 6 years to try to develop knowledge, to grow knowledge in the African countries by giving courses and everything, so that they can develop and know and understand the risk, because we can say in general purpose that temperature sensitive product, not only in Africa, but anywhere in the world is a big issue for insurers. But on a more topical aspect, each company, you can, if you know the experience of a company, let's say Joanne was talking about South Africa, I'm sure there are many companies who have developed a good logistic so that insurance can be done. Maybe in Nigeria, it's more difficult for the time being, but maybe for certain companies that I see, for example, my immediate speaker seems to know very well what he's doing, okay, and know all its challenges. Insurers now have to step up and try to partner with these people, so that eventually the market will grow. Because let's face it, in Africa, when I say Africa, I say African countries practically in its whole. But two main resources which they can export is either mining, raw materials, but is fossil fuel, oil, coal, cobalt, nickel, diamonds, etc., and agricultural products. And it can be not only agricultural products for export, but also trans-border. And this is a huge market. But insurers have to understand, but evaluate the risk and try and begin to grow in this market. But the only way for me, I think, that the insurance market in Africa will grow is by getting expertise on the local farmers, the local logistic partners, and partnering with them to see how they work and begin to take risk, because that's the main thing, is to take risk. Marine cargo insurance in Africa is very profitable because the reason is simple. African insurers doesn't want to take risks, so they take good risk. It's time for them to step up and try to be more innovative. Innovative maybe by having control. Well, digitalization and technology will help definitely, because insurers want to have some control on the logistic part, on the transport within Africa. If they are able, and I know now there are startups who are going on technology optimism and everything, so that we can control what's happening. And if this can be done, I don't see why insurers won't be able to insure this risk.
Thank you so much, Bruno. That's a really interesting presentation, and also a good plea to the industry there at the end to take a bit more risk. They should be risk takers, shouldn't they? Kingsley, let me turn over to you now. You've obviously been working with traders and insurers across the continent for a while, helping them resolve their claims from stillfish, and now with your digital products at Optimize. How often do you encounter temperature damage claims or claims related to breach of cold chain? And are these problems peculiar to Africa, or is this a global issue?
Thank you very much, Liz, for giving me the opportunity to take part in this panel. I think the topic is very important for Africa as a marketplace. So the question, I think, centers around how often we encounter temperature damage claims, or maybe claims related to breach in cold chain. So just to give you a bit of context, the first company which we started in South Africa, and we are now present across the continent, is Stillfresh. And the reason why we started Stillfresh was really to help African insurers, but also African traders who are encountering problems with their shipments in transit, whether intra-Africa or from without Africa. Now, our portfolio consists, 55% of our portfolio consists of temperature-sensitive products. So we are talking here of fruits and vegetables, fish, meat, dairy products, vaccines, so things like ice cream as well. Now, we did a study on our portfolio. What we found was that 1 out of every 3 claims that we resolve or that we were instructed on had an element of temperature variation. Now, the reason for temperature variation are many. You have things like either the container itself broke down, or someone didn't set the container to the right temperature, or the truck that was transporting the container within the continent didn't have a genset, or maybe didn't have power to power that container during the inland route, or for some reason at the port, the container was not plugged into power supply. So the reasons for temperature variation could be many, but 1 out of every three cases that we've resolved has an element of temperature variation. So we see the breach of cold chain every day. This is an ongoing concern for our customers who are dealing in temperature sensitive products. But what I want to say is that this problem, while it is prevalent across the African continent, it is not exclusive to the African continent. Because so long as you have human beings involved in this supply chain, errors are bound to occur. And the causes of temperature fluctuation in transit, which I've listed earlier on, mostly come as a result of human errors. But I think from an African perspective, this problem is particularly recurrent. So if you're looking from a Cameroonian perspective, we have NAO. NAO is the supplier of electricity. Every now and again, if you've lived in Cameroon or in many West African countries, which I think the problem is similar, there's power failure. So as we are going through this session, one neighborhood in Cameroon would be out of power supply at this particular point in time. Now, in Nigeria, you'd have NEPA that is responsible for electricity supply. And in Nigeria, you have generators, which has almost become a part of everyday life. In South Africa, you've got Eskom. Eskom has its own challenges to maintain regular power supply to warehouses, to the port terminals, and things like that. So I think on the African continent, temperature-sensitive problems is particularly relevant because we encounter this on a daily basis. And I just want to tap in here into what Bruno was talking about when it comes to the use of insurance to mitigate some of these problems. Unfortunately, as he indicated, many of the insurance companies on the African continent are not very keen on taking risks for this type of products. And so the question then comes, or that what we receive from our customers is always, what do we do then? If we don't have access to insurance, what do we do then to mitigate some of these losses that we are seeing? And what we are saying is that from an international trader's perspective, someone who does not have insurance, someone who chooses not to take insurance, or maybe someone who has not had the opportunity or does not have insurance companies in their countries to take out insurance, there are a couple of things that you should do. The first of them, it starts from when you are about to export or import your cargo. Let's say you are an exporter. You need to be able to document all the processes that you've gone through to ensure that your cargo leaves your custody in the right condition. So if you're a fruit exporter, you need information about the harvest date of your fruits. If on the harvest it was taken to your pack house, we need to know when it went to the pack house. We need to know what temperature it was in your cold store. We need to know when it was stuffed in the container. You need to be able to demonstrate that as it went into the container. Just tapping into what Ibrahim said, the container should be stuffed correctly and ensure that the load line is not crossed and things like that. But more importantly, if you're using a data logger to measure your temperature fluctuation in transit, you need to know where was the data loggers placed within your container. All of this information is really important. And the reason why it's important is that if somewhere along the chain there is a breach or an interruption or an increase in temperature, you want to be able to demonstrate either to your buyer or to the shipping line or the inland transit carrier that everything was done as is recommended from your side. If you're not able to demonstrate that, then you'll be really hard pushed to get a settlement offer or to have your claim resolved by any of the liable third parties. Then the second part is if you are an importer. Many African countries, for example, Cameroon, we're importing apples from South Africa. South Africa is exporting to countries like Uganda, Kenya or Egypt is even exporting to Kenya as well. So I think there's an increase in inter-Africa trade. And so from an importer's perspective, you want to be able to demonstrate to your supplier that everything, or from the moment that the container arrived in your premises or within your custody, how did you handle that container? What was the outcome of the produce from that container? And you should be able to provide this information to your supplier or to the carrier in record time, but objectively. So that means this information should either be collected by a qualified surveyor or an independent third party, or in certain cases, you should be able to use technology to provide that information. So one tool which all of us, we have in our possession at the moment is our cell phone. So how do you leverage a cell phone to mitigate some of these temperature sensitive or these temperature related risks that we have in Africa? You take a photograph of your cell phone the moment that the container arrives on your premises. So before you open this container, you take a photograph of all sides of the container. You take a photograph of the seal of the container, and you take a photograph or a short video of the opening process of the container. Then you see your cartons as they are stored within that container. You choose one of those boxes to open, and then take photographs or videos of the typical, the visual evidence or the visual state of the cargo itself. And all of this information can be shared via WhatsApp or digital platforms like the one that we are running with the customers around the world. But I think what is really important as we collect this evidence is to make sure that it is objective, or at least it is independent. And this level of independence can be brought in by the use of technology. So coming back to the questions or the questions that you asked, yes, we do see temperature-related damages across the continent. We do see an increase in this problem across the continent, but this is not a problem that is, exclusive to Africa, even though we see that in Africa there's a heightened, this problem is increasing, but it's not exclusive to Africa. Thank you very much, Liz.
Thank you very much indeed, Kingsley, and thank you to all of you for really interesting presentations. I think we've been on a journey through the challenges of transporting temperature-sensitive products across Africa, and actually perhaps it is also quite reassuring to hear that it's not just an African problem, that everybody across the world is challenged by this. So I just need to close off now by saying thank you all very much for spending time with us. And for those of you listening in, I hope that you've really enjoyed this session. Many thanks. Goodbye.
Bye.